an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering A Wizard Alone. Pages 100 through 148. In these pages, Nita and Dairine kind of make up. She finally goes and sees, oh my god, I was about to call him Nito. Guys, Kit. In person. It's been a minute. These are very spaced out. And overall, I'm kind of thinking that maybe Mr. Millman is a wizard. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Patricia for commissioning this episode and for her flexibility, because I had to move this from yesterday due to not feeling well yesterday. Much better today, thank God. Yeah, forgive me, guys. When they're this spaced out, but you know, it really isn't an excuse because I have been covering these books for a minute now, so I should at least fucking know Kit's name. But they're actually like, when you step back and look at what happens in this 50 pages, and I will mention too, when I say 50 pages, it's because I had to stop in the middle of a chapter again. These are just not, the chapters aren't broken up in a way that it makes sense to cover by chapter. I just couldn't do it and not be like far over or far under on certain episodes. And it just didn't seem like the way to go. So I paused in the middle of a chapter, right after the section where Nita goes to see Tom and Carl. And I think you guys will see where that break is if you are reading along. But there actually isn't a whole lot of forward movement on many things in this section. It's more revisiting of some of the relationships and getting things, I don't want to say completely back to normal, but it feels more like we started off in great tumult. Nothing felt right. And now we're starting to approach some communication between people, you know? So the end of the last section, I just finished with the moment when Nita puts the spell on Dairine's bed so that it goes to Pluto, and has also enchanted the rest of the furniture in the house so that Dairine will immediately be transported to whatever room she's supposed to be in for school at that moment. Great bit. I really love that. So I start off this time with her going to see Mr. Millman, who is the school's counselor. The covert quality of the meetings, because she goes before school starts, was enhanced by the fact that Mr. Millman didn't even have his own office because he traveled from school to school in the district every day. Neither he nor anyone else in school knew where he was going to be from one session to the next. Nita most often found him in a spare office down in the administrative wing of the school, a room furnished with a metal desk and a few wooden chairs and not much else. Today, he was there, sitting behind the old beat-up desk with the office door open and working intently on one of those metal ring puzzles in which the 5 constituent rings have to be interlaced. So, first of all, I really want to know how many people have encountered this sort of impermanence with a counselor at school, because we had like a guidance counselor who had a assigned office that they were always in. I only met with a guidance counselor like once or twice. It was never like a real ongoing session thing. It was always for like, you know, beginning to get my plans in place for applying to colleges. Or I went once after I like got in a fight with my boyfriend publicly. And they were just like, because I took a swing at him. That was like a moment where I really did try to like beat his face in. And other than that, not much experience with the actual counselor so much as just knowing that they had a permanent setup where they always were. And I find that to be like not only sort of weird, but also it feels like not a great impression to give kids, that like the counselor is so undervalued that they don't even have a permanent place at the school. And also, oftentimes people who are going to counseling sessions are looking for some sort of feeling of stability in their lives, and to never know when your meeting's going to be or where it will be feels like it's not going to inspire confidence. You know, it just sort of felt like this isn't great. I don't know. Maybe I'm just too sensitive to it. But she comes in and she's talking about how he doesn't look at all like you would expect. He was young. He had a big black beard. He was lanky. He wore a suit, but he did so as if it had an invisible sign on the back of it saying, "They made me wear this. Don't take it seriously." I really, really like that line a lot. There is a moment in, and it's a different impression, but nevertheless, there's a moment in Community. There's a character named Jeff who is like this egomaniac, basically. And this teacher is teaching a class on how to like embrace life. And Jeff doesn't get it. He isn't doing it. And he's trying to fake it. And the teacher calls him out and says, exactly how many, like suit sweatshirt combos did you have to try on before you got to the exact one that says, "I don't care"? And it's just like a perfect demonstration of a type of personality that you want to look like you don't give a shit, and you spend hours agonizing over how to give that impression. Obviously, that's not what he means here, but it feels like a sort of that same kind of thing where you can see what somebody actually is despite the clothing that they're wearing, if that makes sense. Their clothes are attempting, allegedly, to put forth a certain message about them, but who they are shines out so much that the clothes don't actually accomplish it, you know? So he gives her the puzzle that he's working on to see if she can solve it, and she absolutely does. And I love this relationship. So he asks Nita how her days have been. "Not the best," Nita said. "I had to throw my sister out of bed this morning. She didn't want to go to school again." "That seems to be turning into a routine," Mr. Millman said. "And from your expression, I get the feeling she didn't appreciate it. She try the line about your mother again?" Nita nodded. "And he didn't punch her out?" Nita allowed herself a slight smile. The temptation was there. They talked for maybe 20 minutes. Millman's style wasn't so much that of a shrink as of a coach. No long silences, no mm-hms that transparently tried to draw you out and get you to talk about things. You talked or not, as you pleased, and Mr. Millman did the same. You asked questions or answered them, or didn't answer them, also as you pleased. It was all very leisurely and casual, and Nita was sure that Mr. Millman was getting a lot more out of what she said than she suspected. But possibly because of the way he handled their sessions, she found that this wasn't bothering her. So this is when he asks about her nightmares. And she doesn't really get into it, but he talks about the loss of appetite, sleep troubles, mood swings as depression. He says fighting it probably won't make it go away faster, may prolong it, in fact. Let it be there and do your best to work around it or through it, and do what you usually do. Work on things you would normally enjoy. I would say play, but no one wants to hear that at a time like this. It makes them feel guilty, even if that's what they need. If you have projects you work on, hobbies, keep them alive. You'll be glad you did later. The work you do at a time like this is likely to be worth keeping. So this is when he asks if she has hobbies, and she says astronomy, gardening, I help my dad. And then she added magic, and instantly panicked. Now, why did I say that? And I think it's because she could feel that he was a wizard. I don't know. Maybe it would be in her manual if he were actually a wizard. But like, I don't know. I feel like there's a reason for this, and I'm just saying. That's just my theory. That's just my guess. So So something that I have talked about in regard to this series, but I feel the need to bring up again. This author is really great at exploring incredibly serious topics and doing so in a way that feels matter-of-fact enough that it doesn't seem melodramatic or preachy. And delving into depression is really tricky business, especially when you're writing a book that's geared towards children. I love that she respects kids enough to come at this head on. I'm really curious if Diane Duane has had experienced loss herself as a kid and sort of understands that that's sort of something that some people don't have the privilege of avoiding until they're older, which is what we all hope will happen, And there is something especially as I get older and I look back at what it was like for me when I very first began to go through depression, I didn't know that's what it was. And I don't think my parents realized either. They just knew that I suddenly got really difficult to deal with, that I didn't seem to show interest in things that had been everything to me. And I think a lot of it they actually attributed to my boyfriend at the time. I think they thought that I was upset about him or that he was influencing me or something. But truthfully, it was just this devastating black hole of depression that I couldn't crawl out of. I couldn't get myself to give a shit about things. And I remember going to New York with my parents, and it was supposed to be this treat. And I must have been 15 or 16 years old and looking around at things and my mother trying to point things out that she thought were interesting or beautiful. And I just couldn't muster up any sort of interest or response. And it was frustrating because I could see from the outside that I wasn't behaving rationally or like myself. And I could see that my mother was upset at my lack of response, but I couldn't even get up the energy to fake it. And I remember hearing her on the phone with somebody afterward talking about how I barely cracked a smile the entire time that we were there and feeling really guilty about it. And I just didn't understand. And I think that that's something that flies under the radar for a lot of people because folks love to just dismiss teens as being really melodramatic for no reason, in quotes, or attributing it all to hormones in a way that implies that because it's hormones, it's not real, which is truly amazing because hormones drive our entire bodies. So if it is, quote, just hormones, it's very real. That's just as real as anything. Hormones are what, cause me to get migraines and bloat and bleed once a month. Come on. So there's just this sort of dismissiveness to it that I think can be really damaging because a lot of teens don't get taken seriously when they're going through something like this because people don't take teens seriously in general. And I try so hard to keep that in mind whenever I'm talking to somebody who's of that age. Owen has a relative who is just about 16, I think. And she'll have reactions to things that I sort of have to remind myself at that age how a lot of things that would look trivial now were my whole world, were everything to me at that time, And with Nita, it's just such the fact that she has lost her mother, she could be potentially going through this kind of depression anyway, because she is reaching an age where this shit could be just popping off because she's going through puberty. And the fact that you have the potential for depression isn't really necessarily revealed until other development starts taking place. And then she loses her mother, and on top of something that might have been happening anyway is this incredible tragedy. So it's obviously ramped up to 11 for Nita. and she's still trying to hold it together for her family. And I have to say that I really appreciated later on her father sort of apologizes to Nita for the fact that he hasn't been present. And she argues with him and says, like, I don't see it that way. And I think she's telling the truth, actually. But that doesn't mean that it's not maybe a little bit true. I personally just have a lot less patience with men than I had. And I spent last weekend with a friend of mine, and she told me about some things going on with her partner, and then some things going on with the partner of a mutual friend. And in every case, it was just these dudes failing utterly to step up when shit got intense, when things went wrong or went bad. And when I was reading this and I saw her like talking to Miller and him saying like, so it seems like this is becoming a routine, I had to sort of fight off this flare of irritation, because I was just like, man, can dudes fucking please like not rely on any female in their lives for everything instead of just doing shit for themselves? It gets so old, you know? And I know that that's not necessarily fair to her dad, because he's going through something really intense also, but literally she's a child, and maybe it's not fair, but it's your job. So step the fuck up. And I was just really relieved that before the end of this section, he acknowledges that and says that he will, because I was frankly just out of patience, y'all. I really am. I look back at the relationships that I had over the years and how much space I gave, and I just don't have it in me anymore, I'll be honest. So anyway, she leaves this and he takes it as like magic, like tricks, and she lets him think that, but she just can't understand why she blurted that shit out. And later on, she's thinking about needing to meet him again and how she's going to cover for the fact that she made him think this. And when she's talking to Kit, Kit's like, well, you could use actual magic and make it look like you did a card trick. And she's like, I mean, I could, but that's like really close to lying. And I feel like that's playing with fire. Because reminder, if you lie, you lose your magic. Not necessarily all at once, I don't think, but I think it's sort of a cumulative effect. I could be wrong and misremembering that. Sort of the effect like Dresden Files. There's a sort of similar thing. If you swear to something on your power and then you break that promise, or it turns out you were lying, that has a cumulative effect. You don't necessarily lose your magic all at once, but it dramatically reduces your power until eventually, if you keep doing it, you don't have it anymore. I don't exactly remember how specifically it goes down in this universe, but she just doesn't want to mess with that. I really do enjoy that as a plot device in these books, because it would be really easy to allow everybody to lie. And that the fact that the author has restricted herself so that they have to tell the truth, even to authority figures like their parents, it makes for a more interesting story, because having people just lie to each other is honestly pretty cheap. It can feel really outright lazy, to be frank. And it's the way that a lot of stories out there operate, unfortunately, is they just revolve around a series of miscommunications or outright lies. And I find them tedious and really unexciting to read and uninteresting in terms of character stuff, because I don't root for people who just deceive each other. It's not fun. And this author deciding to add that rule in means that she has to do slightly more unexpected stuff with the plot, because she's not going to let her characters get away with things that easily. And it's just much more of a surprise to see what's going to happen. You know, we have a conversation a little bit later with Kit and his mother, where they're talking about somebody who died doing a piece of magic that protected this whole like planet. And she asks him how old the person was, and he doesn't want to tell her because they were his age and he knows that his mother's going to worry. but he can't, like, not. He has to be honest with her. And how totally different that conversation could have gone if he had chosen to lie. It's just less interesting than seeing how his mother copes with the very real danger and the knowledge and understanding of that danger. So there's also this whole thing with Paunch. So, also tiring in a different way, because he's, had that whole thing where he was exploring this kid's mind and climbing dunes, which, like, they weren't real dunes, but they were like real dunes anyway. So he's tired from that. But it says also tiring in a different way was the amount of time he'd had to spend comforting Paunch afterwards. The dog had seemed all right when they first got back, and had gone through the promised dog biscuits as if he hadn't eaten anything for days. But as the afternoon passed, Paunch started to look unhappy. And just after dinner, when Kit was helping his mama clear the table, they were both startled by a sound coming from outside. Paunch was howling. So when Kit finally goes out there, Paunch is basically like, I don't understand how the, like, lone power could even do that to him. He couldn't even do anything and he was good. It's no fair. And basically his howling is the equivalent of him, like, sobbing. And it gets all these other dogs worked up, which results in the whole street, like, yelling at each other. Which was just one of the realest things. If you live in an area with people with dogs, usually a sort of a suburban area, this is indeed what happens. People, like, have their dogs in the backyard and they feed off each other. I used to take a lot of walks in the evening. I try not to do it after dark anymore because it's not great around here, actually. But people would have their dogs out for the night. And me just walking by would get one worked up. And then before you knew it, the whole street was howling dogs. And it was like, 1:45 and people would be really pissed. And I'm just like, I can't help that your dog reacts this way. All I did was literally walk by. Sorry, I didn't trespass on your property. I didn't do anything. But dogs are like that, man. But I just found it interesting that Kit is realizing that Paunch, like, part of what Paunch can do sort of seems to feed off of his own power. That might turn out to be a problem if he isn't positive of how much power Paunch is drawing, or if he isn't prepared for that, I don't know. Let's see. I'm trying to jump to the next part. He comes inside. Oh my God. They don't have any more of Kit's particular preference in breakfast cereal. Let's see. He goes in, his mom's like, just make some toast. I just think back sometimes, guys, I know this is not important, but, like, personally, toast is not breakfast. Is that just me? Like, it's just not. Toast is like a thing that you have with an actual breakfast. For example, this morning I made a bacon tomato sauce, or bacon, tomato, spinach, and onion scramble with some feta cheese and toast and a cup of tea. Just toast? What is that? What's the point? It's nothing. You don't even feel it. Same with cereal, to be honest. I used to eat cereal for breakfast and then go to school. And I don't know how the fuck I did it. Except for the fact that lunch was like only 2 hours after we got to school, practically. So, anyway, so let's see, she says, it reminded me, is it just me, or has down the street's dog been louder than usual the past week or so? You mean Tinkerbell? That was not the dog's real name in the dog's own language, and possibly reason enough for the down the street dog's incessant barking. Do you think you could talk to him, sweetie? She wiggled her fingers in what she imagined was a vaguely wizardly gesture. Kit raised his eyebrows while he put the bread in the toaster. I can try, but Mama, just because I can talk to him doesn't necessarily mean he's going to listen. The dog's a head case. He thinks I'm a crook, but then he thinks everybody who doesn't live in the house is a crook. Dogs get like their owners, they say. Huh? Nothing, sweetie, his mother said, looking suddenly guilty. Kit kept the smile off his face while he waited for the toast to come up. It was going to be fun to be middle-aged someday and be told the things his mother was really thinking, with no more need for the kid filter that parents routinely seemed to self-install. I really loved this. First of all, Kit, as much as I totally understand your thinking here, keep in mind that Nita's mother is gone, so don't take it for granted that you will be middle-aged and your mom will still be around. So enjoy shit, please, and don't take it for granted. But secondly, there is something to be said of getting older and getting, like, more of a straight-shooting parent all of a sudden who actually tells you shit that they would try and hide from you when you were younger. Personally, I never really had this problem myself because my mother would try and, like, protect me and lie to me, but she was a really, really bad liar. And I could tell most of the time either what was going on or could at the very least figure out that she was lying to me about something. And then I would pursue my own lines of inquiry and find out what was actually going on. So I didn't really have this, but I completely understand, like, looking forward to it. And I'm assuming that that dog's owners are maybe not great. So we shall see. I'm very curious to find out what Tinkerbell has to do with the rest of the story. So he says, Mom, you have any more trouble with the TV? What? She looked at Kit as if she couldn't understand what he was talking about and then blinked. Oh, no, it's been all right. Except now that you mention it, your dad told me you weren't joking about the cooking shows. And this is when he has to start being honest with her. And she's like, look, have things tried to eat you? And he says, aliens? No. Like doing that very careful qualifying thing. They might have thought about it, but so far it's not a crime to think about it. In one way, it's like crossing the street. You know you have to watch out for traffic, so you look both ways. In some parts of the universe, you know that the locals think of you as a potential snack food, and you're just careful when you visit them to not act like a snack. But mostly, wizards are nobody's snack. And some of them owe us. So he talks about one of those species had a problem where their sun was going to go nova. One of us went in there and kept that from happening. And let's see, where is it? The wizardry was a big one. Doing the wizardry killed her, and the word got out. Now all the spinies have something else to think about. Be nice to your food. It might save your life. She was how old? His mother said suddenly. He'd been hoping this wouldn't come up. If you did it in human years, he said, she'd have been about my age. His mother's gaze rested upon him as if a suspicion had been confirmed. Does this kind of thing happen often? She said. It was so tempting to lie, but no temptation was more fatal for a wizard. Every day, Mama, Kit said. There aren't enough of us to do the job. Probably never will be. Lots of us die of old age in our beds, but some of us... His mother looked at him and her expression changed. It became less confused, but the look that replaced it troubled Kit more for reasons he couldn't understand. I don't know why this surprises me, she says. I'm a nurse, after all. It looks like we're both in a service profession. I just keep thinking you should have been offered a choice when you were old enough to understand what you were choosing. I was, Kit said. He pushed the plate away. You told me you decided to be a nurse when you were 8. Yes, but you're going to say that you didn't know everything that'd be involved in being a nurse when you were 8. And right then, being a nurse mostly looked like you with a pink plastic kit, a toy stethoscope, and toy thermometer. But you decided anyway because you wanted to help people. So when you were old enough, you went to nursing school, and look, now you're a nurse. And it's not so bad, right? That's what it's like to be a wizard. I promise I'll keep letting you know what it looks like as I get older, but when I signed up, I knew that was what I wanted to do. I knew right away. Sure, it gets more complicated as you go on, but doesn't everything? His mama gave him a long look. Then she smiled again, very slowly, and just half a smile, the kind of expression she gave his pop when she was admitting he'd been right about something but didn't want to admit it out loud. You should finish up your last piece of toast, she said, and don't forget to rinse the plate. I really liked this conversation a lot. I'm not entirely sure that I agree with Kit on this. I get his point. But I do feel like when you're 8 and you decide you want to be a nurse, you've still got a decade between you and being put in any kind of position where you're actually going to be at risk in any way. When you accept that you're going to be a wizard and then you're sent on a trial against the lone power where you may well die immediately after, that doesn't feel the same. So I'm just calling a little bit of bullshit. That said, fine. I'm letting it go. But, you know, I just don't really feel like his argument holds the kind of water that she's acting like it does. I respect that she's just sort of dropping it and that she's proud of him, probably. But also, I don't know. It just doesn't really wash for me. It's fine. So he goes out and he sees Nita waiting for him after school. Or not after school, at lunchtime. And it's the first time that we've like seen them actually together talking. And I was just so relieved, you guys. I didn't realize, I don't think, just how much it was bothering me that they weren't hanging out and that she was so distant from him. And it's not even like it was that long. I've only had like, 2 episodes of coverage of this book so far before this one. So this is the 3rd one. So it wasn't that long, but it still felt really awful to me. So let's see. He asks her how she's doing, and she says something weird is going on. And she tells him about the dreams. And she says about how there was something that like didn't seem to understand the speech. And she says, I thought that in theory everything was supposed to understand it. And Kit's like, I don't think it's just theory. I'm pretty sure it's true. And she says, but knowing the speech also usually helps you understand what's being said. And it's sure not doing the job for me at the moment. So this leads to jump ahead a little bit here, the realization to Nita that there are like 750,000 words in the speech and she knows like 5,000, something like that. Thankfully, when she goes and meets with Tom and Carl later, they point out how few words in English she necessarily knows in comparison to how many words exist in English, which is true and fair. But, you know, when it's like the kind of thing that you have been growing sort of, I guess, complacent perhaps about knowing this language, it's a shock. But we will get to that. So this is when she says, I think the dreams were alien intelligences trying to get hold of Dairine. It's mostly to do with her relationship with the mechanical sort of wizards, the computer intelligences, and so on. And eventually she goes and talks to Dairine about this, and Dairine is like, I don't think these things are mechanical, actually. I don't think they were there for me at all. Because that's what at first Nita's like, since they were meant to be talking to her, maybe it makes sense that I didn't understand them because that's not my speciality. But then it seems like, you know, that's not actually what was going on. So let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. So she says, it was almost like it didn't know it was speaking. There was something accidental about the communication. Like whoever it was hadn't actually meant to call, except it also felt kind of urgent. It was a sense also that it was somewhere way, way out at the edge. I didn't have time for a proper trace. It didn't last long enough. Besides, I was asleep myself at the time. Maybe the trouble with the message got garbled with something that I was dreaming. And I love this moment. She says something about how the sleep is part of the depression. I'm tired all the time. He says it'll go away someday. What a big help, Kit muttered. Nita laughed then, an oddly wistful sound that startled Kit. No, she said, really, it is a help. Knowing that someday it will go away makes it a little easier. Not a lot, but every little bit helps at the moment. It's interesting because, like, it can kind of go either way. somebody telling you that eventually it'll go away can make it easier to bear, or you can just get angry and not believe them, or you can get frustrated that, well, how about now? How about it goes away now? And you just get really impatient about it, you know? She has a good attitude, is what I'm saying, but it's not easy to maintain a good attitude sometimes. It's just not. I wish. So, let's see. I'm trying to find another section where, because she and Kit talk about this for a while, and she just sort of ends on, I guess I need to do more research. And this is when Kit tells her about the situation with Daryl. I forget that they can do mind to mind, so he can just show her the imagery of what it was like when he went, which is really cool and super helpful. That's also what she does later with Dairine, in order to show Dairine what was in the weird dream. And that's how Dairine is able to sense the, quote, flavor of this thing and realize that it's not somebody that she is meant to be dealing with. So let's see. This is when Kit says, I could have used you there if only for moral support. Are you sure I'd do you much good at this point? She said, I'm not exactly stable right now. If I lost my grip in the middle of something important, I don't know what I'd do afterward. Kit wasn't sure what to say to that. Nita was too good a wizard to understate or overstate the problem. If she wasn't confident enough to work actively at the moment, maybe she was wiser to sideline herself somewhat until she felt more sure of herself. That certainty of what to do and how to do it had saved them both more than once. If her certainty should fail at a crucial moment... Your call, Neats, Kit said. I don't want to push you. If you really need me, Nita said, all you have to do is yell. You know I'll be there in a second if I can figure out how to get where you are. I really liked that. Just... He trusts her judgment so much. And that is a really big deal. You know, this is something that I've personally been working on, is like not only trusting other people a little bit more, but also asking them to trust me. And it's amazing how many different like issues can actually be boiled down to whether or not someone trusts you. Whether they trust you to be honest with them if you're feeling a certain way, whether they trust you to make a good call on a particular topic, whether they trust you to be responsible and handle your own shit. There are a lot of ways that it can manifest subtly that somebody doesn't quite trust you. And learning to call people out on that is a major part of making your relationships a little bit more stable, because once people realize that's the foundation of their uncertainty, I feel like that can help, you know, even with just in a particular situation, making sure that somebody's like believing your word. And they're like, do you not trust me to assess what happened there and tell you the truth about what happened? And I just appreciated this so much. Kit stopping and being like, you know what? We've been through a lot. She's good at what she does. And the fact that she is good and can make a good judgment call is what has saved our lives. So I have to know that about her. And she wouldn't make a statement like that idly. She knows that I need her, and she isn't just trying to get out of it. She is genuinely trying to be careful. I just appreciated it. So they go back in, because, reminder, this was just lunch. Nita walked home from school that afternoon with the robot problem still very much occupying her mind. So she gets home and Dairine is waiting on the front step. I found this very amusing. Dairine is like, well, I'm not going inside when you have a live teleport spell going. And Nita has to be like, oh, come on. It ended automatically at like once school was over. So they go inside and Dairine says, I made an agreement with the principal and Dad to stop cutting. That's not exactly what I was asking about, Nita said. What about Dad? How did he handle it? He was okay, Dairine said from the living room. There was something about her sister's tone of voice that made Nita forget about food for the moment. She went into the living room after her. Was he upset? Nita asked. No, Dairine said. He should have been, Nita said. If things were normal, he probably would have been, but nothing is normal. Dairine sat down very abruptly on a hassock in front of one of the easy chairs. Neats, she said, so softly that Nita could barely hear her. School sucks. It sucks so completely that even the speech barely has words for it. It doesn't feel like any of it matters anymore, and everyone who looks at me is just thinking either poor little kid, or she's just trying to get sympathy by looking so sad. Why doesn't she just get over it? If I can't actually hear them thinking it, I can see it in their faces. Every day of this is like Chinese water torture. The seconds just fall on your head one after another, and everyone is just like the last one. The minutes just crawl by and nothing gets better. Everything keeps hurting. And you have to sit there in the middle of all this meaningless junk and put up with it and act like it matters. Like anything matters. Oh, girl, that is a mood. Whew. Talk about depression. Yep. This feeling of having to put on a show and act like any of this has any sort of real significance. Girl. Yep. I've thought of leaving, Dairine said, barely above a whisper. Running away. Nita flushed first cold, then hot. It would kill Dad. You know it would. I know, she said. That's why I haven't done it. But it doesn't make it any easier, Neats. And this, for me, the running away, felt like, I don't know if this is intentional, but it felt like a slightly softened version of talking about suicide. Just wanting to get out, to get away from it, and her saying it would kill Dad, and that being like the only reason that somebody doesn't. I was talking to somebody very close to me recently because they were having suicidal thoughts. And I said something about how, like, you better fucking not, because I swear to God, I would never get over it. And they basically were like, yeah, that's like kind of one of the few reasons that I haven't. And it's not a great reason why. And I was like, isn't it? Or is it a totally perfectly adequate reason why not? Like, you know, but this really, like, the two of them finally having this conversation, I just really appreciated it a lot. And she talks about how the counselor at her school, the one that she's been assigned to, just doesn't connect. She doesn't even have a clear memory of what it's like to be a kid anymore. I know she doesn't. That part of her brain might just as well have a big sign on it saying, your message here. She's completely relieved not to remember what it was like to be one of us poor, powerless creatures. Just having to look at her makes my brain hurt. And Nita's like, well, maybe we could get you transferred to Millman. And Dairine's like, you know, honestly, it really wouldn't matter. I'll put up with it all. I won't let it break me, but I'm going to hate every single water torture drop second of it. And I may just let you know about that every now and then. Come here and give me a hug, Nita said. Dairine gave her a look. You're just saying that because Mom would say it. I'm saying it, Nita said, furious, because right now I need a hug. The nature of the look Dairine was giving Nita changed. She got up off the hassock, went over to Nita, and hugged her hard. Nita hung on to Dairine, not saying anything for a few moments, then let go of her and went back into the kitchen. And this is when she brings up the machine buddies, and Dairine's like, no, these were not for me. And she says, anyway, Neats, that call wasn't for me. It's all yours. Great, Nita said. All I have to do now is figure out what it wants. Dairine wasn't even listening anymore, though. She was already wandering out the door. Nita watched her go, let out one more of many quiet, worried breaths. Oh, Dairine said, by the way, I'm sorry about this morning. Really, Neats. Very sorry. I was being incredibly stupid. So would you kindly get off your butt and bring my bed back from Pluto? I really, really enjoyed that. So Nita buries herself in her manual, and she keeps seeing that, like, the section of it that has to do with the speech is getting bigger. And she decides that she's not going to absorb this tonight, so she's just going to go to bed, and she's using a spell for lucid dreaming. And she finally gets it in place. It doesn't activate until she falls asleep. And all of a sudden, she's standing in this dark place, and there is light falling in one spot from a source that she can't pinpoint. In that faintly humming darkness under the single source of light lay a big slab or dais of some kind, and there was some kind of figure on it. Under the white radiance that seemed to fall on it from nowhere, and the figure kneeling there in the center of the stone glittered blindingly in the light. It was a knight, kneeling there on the pure white stone, completely covered from head to foot in plate armor, and holding before him with its point resting on the stone, a sword in a metal scabbard that gleamed even more brightly than the armor did. And she's looking at this and is thinking about this image being sort of familiar. At the same time, she also thought of the robot she'd seen the previous night, for the knight's helmet was the same in front, a perfectly smooth, blank surface with just a single dark opening crossing it for the eyes to look out through. "I'm on errantry," Nita said, "and I greet you." There was a long silence. "Greetings also," the answer came back. Though it was a human-sounding voice, it didn't come from inside the armor. It was omnidirectional and seemed to come out of nothing the way the light did. So Nita's very relieved that they can all communicate. "Were you trying to talk to me last night?" "Many times," the voice said. "I couldn't understand a lot of what you were saying. What can I do for you?" "Nothing," the voice said. "This is the vigil. There is nothing to do but wait for the fight to begin again." "What fight?" "With the enemy," the knight said. "What else is there? Outside of the fighting, nothing exists but this." "When will the fight start again?" "Soon." "What happens when you win?" "There's no winning this battle, but also no losing it, because for the enemy, for the shadow that stalks this darkness, there is no winning the fight either." For the first time, the knight moved, lifting his head up into the light. There was no telling how she knew it, but Nita knew that inside the helmet the knight was smiling. All the darkness sang with the force of his resolve and with his amusement, a grim but good-natured cheerfulness that seemed very strange when taken together with what he'd just said. That good cheer, in the face of what sounded like a hopeless situation, struck a chord somewhere in Nita, even in her sleep. The sense got stronger and stronger in the dark air around her of a great strength being hoarded in this place for the oncoming battle, of an unusual bravery. Valor. That was the word that described what she felt seeping into this space from the glittering form at its center. It made her feel like she had to do something to be of use. "Are you sure there's nothing I can do to help you?" "Tell what fights the enemy that it will be held here, that it will have to fight here again and again, but that it won't pass." And again Nita could feel the fierce, amused smile inside the armor. "I can't stay," Nita said, "but I know where this place is now. I can come back if you need my help, or can bring someone. No help will avail here. This fight must happen only as it has happened, or it will be lost. And if it's lost, everything else will be. Without warning, darkness fell. Nita, uncertain where she was or what had happened, tried to see, but in that complete blackness there was no way to see anything at all. Briefly she heard the sound of laughter, challenging and cheerful, and the ringing scrape of a sword being drawn. I love this so much. So I don't know if I am at all correct here. But this doesn't feel like... This feels like something to do with her personally. I don't know if that's right or not. But I guess we'll see. Because like part of me was thinking that the darkness was her depression. The idea of a fight that like you can't win, but also it can't win, that just doesn't end. That's something that can apply to both the greater forces, but it can also be a personal thing, you know, something that you're never done fighting, but you always have to continue. You don't win exactly, but I don't know. I might be reading into this too much. So she wakes up finally, and it's 2:30 in the morning. And she's repeating to herself what she heard. Eventually, Nita fell asleep again, and down the corridors of dreams, she heard the sword come scraping out of its sheath again and again and again. So then we go into the next chapter, Quandaries. And Nita gets ready and goes to school. This is when she runs into her dad, and he apologizes for just not really being there for her. Tells her that he's going to be late to work, and she starts reading the manual again. I can't believe how dumb I've been about this, she thought. The quick vocabulary test she'd taken before her dad came down for his coffee had suggested Nita was readily familiar with about 650 terms in the speech. Wow, even less than I said. Out of a possible 750,000. And more words were being rediscovered or coined every day by wizards of every species. There were even regional dialects and variants, alternate recensions used by species whose physiologies or brain structure, sometimes even the structure of their home universe, meant that the most basic forms of the speech had to be altered to make sense. I've been treating this like it was a dead language, Nita thought, but it's alive. It's the language of life itself. How could it not be? And she's beginning to she starts to get a little bit concerned about her preoccupation here. And eventually what she goes to ask Tom and Carl is whether or not she could potentially be using her study of the speech as a procrastinating mechanism. We will get there. But let's see. Nita remembered Dairine's line about the robot and how the species contacting Nita seemed to have no plurals, possibly even no personal pronouns. What she'd heard last night seemed to confirm the idea. He never said we, she thought, but then he never said I either. There was something so limited about the way he was expressing himself. Was that just because I was having trouble dealing with the way he uses the speech? Or was he hiding something? And why? So, let's see. I'm trying to make sure that I have enough time to talk about everything because I only have like 7 minutes left. Boop, boop, boop. Oh, okay, right. So this is when Dairine's leaving for school. She has Spot in her bag. Have you been upgrading Spot again? Nita said. He's been upgrading himself, Dairine said. Wireless, optical, some other stuff. She looked affectionately at the bag as she shouldered it, and the little eye on its silvery stalk disappeared back down between the backpack and its flap. Nita spent some moments reading the manual in the quiet, and finally she realizes she's going to be late. She heads out, and she keeps studying the manual all day. She's really only half paying attention in any of her classes. And at one point, Kit just dips into her mind the way that he does and detects her studying the language and is just like, ooh, this seems grim. And she starts laughing. And they get together and chit-chat at lunch again. Let's see. I'm having enough trouble with this. I seem to have been talking to the same one at least twice. I'm not sure if I was talking to him or it the first time, the time with the clown on the bike. I keep thinking he was holding something back or having trouble saying something, and it could have been important. I'm just going to have to keep trying. What about you? Did you have time to go after your ordeal kit again? Not yet. Paunch is still worn out from the last time. You sure you don't want to come along? I want to work on this speech problem for the moment. Give me a little bit more time. And she tells him that he looks kind of worn out, and he's surprised. And I'm like, does this mean something? Is there another... Has his exposure to whatever's going on with Daryl caused there to be like some kind of long-term drain on him? I'm just very curious. Every time I try to settle down to work it out with the manual, something new goes wrong with the TV or something else interrupts me. I really wonder if there isn't something more happening with the TV than just like things being temperamental and going wrong. I'm curious about it. If that will come up again. Maybe it's something to do with what Nita's experiencing. Things are trying to get in contact with the two of them and not actually succeeding. I don't know. I mean, that would make sense if it's dreams and the TV. Like, they're two sort of... They're means of communication, but they're both sort of not super concrete. Does that make sense? I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching too much. It's fine. I'm just going to put that down and move on. So, let's see. Tom and Carl's backyard was already going twilight this time of year. Nita paused a moment looking up at the sky, which was clear for a change after several days' worth of cloudy weather, and wished that spring would hurry up. She hated these short days. Amen, sister. So happy to be in spring now, you guys. Oh my God. She talks to a koi for a second. I love this so much. Hey, she said, got any words of wisdom? The single koi that had looked back, a white one with an orange patch on its head, drifted up to just beneath the surface and regarded her. Then it stuck its mouth up into the air. Seen in plain daylight, the firefly's just one more bug, but night restores it. Nita raised her eyebrows. The koi gave her a look that suggested she was a waste of its time, then drifted straight back under the lily pads again. If you listen to them for too long, you won't be able to say anything that takes more than 17 syllables, Tom said. So she comes inside and has a cup of tea, and they talk about how it's going to snow shortly. And she asks him, am I using wizardry to avoid life? Tom raised his eyebrows. Wizardry is life, or at least in service of life, by definition. So equally by definition, the answer to that question is no. Want to try rephrasing? I've been spending a lot of time with the manual. So do we all. No, I mean a lot of time, for me anyway. And this means my last really big wizardry, she said, didn't work. There we'd have to disagree. I don't mean in terms of wizardry. I mean in terms of what the pissed off places in the back of my brain think about. My mom still died. Tom said. His expression was non-committal. What I want to know is it possible to use research as a way of putting off doing other stuff you should be doing? Again, anything's possible. What is it you think you should be doing? I don't know. Something more active. You think research is passive? Compared to what I've been doing up until now, yeah. So, yesterday, you guys, I was having trouble deciding, because I really wasn't feeling well, whether I should push back my recordings to today. And I will be honest, I was reading this section, and this was what convinced me it was the right idea. So she talks about optional and how she doesn't like that term. And he's like, it really means more like freelance. Like it's something that like your options are open to you, not like you're not important. And he says, Nita, you wouldn't be the first wizard to get confused about the apparent differences between active and passive work. But the powers that be don't see the distinction, or they see it as largely illusory. If you go through this, you'll see often enough where it says that wizards are told only what they need to know for the work at hand, which leaves you with the question, what do they find in it when there is no work at hand, no official assignment? Nothing, it's never anything that goes to waste. Sooner or later, every wizard's work, however minor, does someone somewhere some good. It's an extension of the all is done for each principle. And there was something about his phrasing there and the idea of like, oh, putting off like my recordings and my work doesn't mean that I'm not doing anything. It means that I'm choosing recovery instead, which is still doing something. It's just that as a person, especially brought up in a capitalist society, only like productivity, in quotes, the kind that brings in money is seen as valuable. So rest and caring for oneself is devalued so much that it feels like laziness and not doing anything. And when he was like, yeah, the powers don't see it like that, I just sort of stepped back and was like, oh, damn. Like, I shouldn't see it like that. I am exhausted. My body feels like achy and like it can't function. Why do I think that I have to push myself to do this thing just because I have decided that's what's valuable when taking care of myself isn't? It was just one of those moments of just sort of, everybody always tells you how important rest is, especially I'm really lucky with my listeners always being supportive of me taking time when I need it. But it's not something that I always manage to like convince myself of. I have to tell myself in rational terms, but in terms of my emotional resonance with that concept, it doesn't always hit. And I was so appreciative of that phrasing because it just really did it for me. And he shows her that his volumes of the manual, 7 or 8 thick volumes like phone books. This one is my vocabulary work for the year. Nita looked at it in horror as Tom dropped it to the table and flipped it open. Remind me never to become a senior, she said, as if you can avoid it when it happens. And this was really interesting because, like, we know that they get less powerful as they age, but they get more vocabulary, which is sort of an interesting dichotomy. I'm wondering if that's on purpose. Like, having that kind of power plus that vocabulary when you're too young is just too much. So they try and make up for the fact that your sheer power is made up for with maybe the ability to be more nuanced and subtle with your language. You know, I don't know. So he says, I wouldn't consider your time wasted. As for not being on active assignment, that's between you and the powers. They value the work we do sufficiently to avoid pushing us to function when it wouldn't be appropriate to the wizard's own best interests. That was another one. That was another line that hit me yesterday. Every now and then I forget to hurt, but the rest of the time I keep seeing those last few hours with my mom over and over. But I can't just sit around. It's not bringing my mother back, and I keep getting the feeling she'd be annoyed with me for, I don't know, indulging myself and just sitting around and feeling bad when I should be busy with something important. Because this is important. Tom nodded. I don't think I can argue with that. So they talk a bit about her dream. And finally she says, I guess that's the other thing that worries me, the possibility of getting stuck in a dream world. And he says, I'm not sure I see that as a danger for you. I'd almost suggest the danger would lie in too much hard-headed practicality. For the time being, you seem to be okay. Let me know how you progress with your alien anyway. And the section ends with, even wizardry may be insufficient to the task, because he's talking about keeping Carl from blowing up the house. See you later. So that was where I stopped. And that was page 148. Yeah. So just wanted to let you all know exactly where I stopped in case it was important to you. Oh, I didn't even see Patricia was in the chat. Sorry, I had my book in front of me the whole time. But Patricia complimented my lipstick. Thank you. And thank you very much for your flexibility and for commissioning this episode. I am excited to be continuing on with the story. I'm very interested to see what happens. I really like the series. Thank you again so much to all of you for listening. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.